Hanukkah. It is finally sunny. I'm in Arcata, California, the second day of my road trip from coast to coast. And it did not start the way I had planned at all. I left Portland, where I live, right before this bizarre snowstorm came in and dumped a couple of inches of snow in Portland. And I rerouted my whole trip. I was going to go through the mountains and some of the places that I had picked out for camping. I just watched the weather forecast. I watched the temperature just go down and down and down. And it went from, the last time I checked, it had gone down to minus 15 Celsius, and that's 4 degrees Fahrenheit at night. So I rerouted my trip. I went the coastal route, and I'm really glad I did, because it gave me an opportunity to connect with a friend that I had made online in person. And she is a detransitioner. I know her from the detransitioner D-Sister group, who lived as a transgender man for over a decade. She took testosterone for 10 years and only detransitioned just 2 or 3 years ago. So it was the first time I got to meet with someone who used to identify as transgender and doesn't anymore in person. It was the first time I got to meet somebody in person. So we had a 3-hour conversation, and I shared some things that I've never shared with anyone. So I'm still processing that, and I'll probably share some more about that conversation and what I learned and some of the takeaways, but it all feels very fresh in my mind still. What's really present for me right now is I'm like a little awkward sharing this, but having this experience of being in an abusive relationship with myself. I just about an hour ago, I came back into a place of inner peace and feeling whole and feeling like my nervous system is regulated. And ever since I left our conversation yesterday, and I realized that some of my travel plans weren't going to work out, I spent all evening and night, and then the entire morning and early afternoon, basically in an abuse cycle that was perpetuated internally. This is something I believe is something we just don't talk about. We don't recognize that when we go through abuse. So when one person is in an abusive relationship with another, that generates victimized parts of the self, but it also generates abuser parts of the self, and then we end up perpetuating that same pattern, those same patterns of abuse internally, long after the original abuser is gone. And sometimes externally too. So, this is how abuse victims become abusers. If we're not aware of this process and we're not recognizing those abusive parts in ourselves, we will turn them on ourselves and others without noticing it. So I've been doing a lot of that this morning, and I'm kind of exhausted from it. But I wanted to share a little bit of what that looks like, having this internal abusive relationship dynamic between my own inner world, my own parts. So in this case, what that looked like is there's a part of me that is really adventurous, and this is who I've been. I've jumped out of airplanes. Like my skydiving instructor tried to talk me into becoming an instructor myself, because she said I was such a natural, and I just jumped before the photographer was even ready. I tried to get out of the plane because I was so excited, and this kind of risk-taking, adventurous spirit is a big part of who I am, and it's something I've really identified around and have taken a lot of pride in. It's something I get admired for. Especially people who are more risk adverse look at me with lots of admiration. So it's become an ego identity for me. Like, I am the risk taker, I am the adventurous person, and I'm very proud of that. And it's a way that I feel appreciated and appreciate myself. And trauma causes that part of me to withdraw. So having been in this abusive relationship with my ex, I became less and less adventurous. I would go on these adventures by myself. Like, we would plan trips, or we would plan adventures, and then my ex would back out at the last minute, and I would end up going by myself. So I had these episodes of being very adventurous, but then when I came home, I kind of became subdued and appeasing to manage the abuse dynamics that I was living with. And after the end of the relationship, that adventurous spirit, like, it had become sort of a coping strategy where I've been trying to reclaim that in a way of basically reclaiming this identity and being liked. So it's coming not from a place of authenticity, but from a place of control, where I'm trying to make myself be the person that I was before all of this happened, so that way I can be liked again, and I can have the same admiration, the same friends, and so on. And so there's that part that is trying to push me into taking risks and doing things that I actually don't really authentically want to be doing. So I like the going into the mountains when it's 15 below Celsius and 4 Fahrenheit, and just toughing it, and gearing up and having this driving through the snow and doing all these crazy things. There's a part that really wants me to do that just so I can fit into that identity. And then there's the protective part of myself that wants the exact opposite, that wants to just take on a completely new identity, which I kind of developed. That part really developed and really came out in my relationship, which is the homebody, right? So this is the, like, I'm gonna just stay home and cook food and be like this caregiving kind of person, like volunteer at a mission or something, or care for people, and just kind of find my identity in being like a carer for others. So it's sort of like the vulnerable narcissist, if you're familiar with the service narcissist, who finds his identity in service to others. And that's it's not really about others. It's not really about the thing that they do, but it's more about feeding their own identity by being seen as the person who does all these things. So they do all these community-oriented things, but in order to be seen as a good person. And I have that part as well. So that's been kind of the opposite part, that's telling me I shouldn't even be on this road trip. I should be at home. I should just... I shouldn't be having fun. I shouldn't be enjoying myself. I'm being selfish. And I should really just live for others. And put all of the resources that I'm using for this road trip, give them all to others, basically. So this whole altruistic, community-oriented care sort of identity. And those two parts have been basically playing tug of war over my soul, basically, where I find myself oscillating between wanting to move fast and be excited and do all these things and sign up for, like, it's like, what's there to do? Like, there's like a zip line, or some sort of like any kind of adventure to just kind of embody that identity. And then there's the part that's like, just turn around. It's not too late. You're only in California. It's just a 2 days drive. Cancel all of your reservations and just drive back to Portland, and don't do this. And like, I find myself just getting really hyper, almost like a manic sort of mind state, and then going into shutdown, where I found myself sitting at this park today, and it was completely just frozen. I just sat there and I just couldn't move. and, and then I had my eyes closed and I was just trying to come back to this place of presence. And as I was sitting there in the parking lot, there was a lot of tourists around and nobody could see me sitting in the car. This family walked past my car, and I heard somebody say, this child say, "There's nothing wrong with you." And I'm like, "What?" and then another child said, like, "There's nothing wrong with you." I'm like, "What is happening right now?" Of course, they were reading the decal on my car, but it was just like the perfect moment where I needed to hear that. Yeah, and come back to it started the process of me coming back to this place of surrendering and being present with what is and with who I am, which at this point is neither. I am neither the adventurer, nor am I this caregiver. I don't. Yeah, either one would be inauthentic. Either one would be just a way to try to control people into liking me by taking on this persona and trying to live into it. And I'm in neither place. I do know that I need things for myself that I can't yet give to others. There are certain ways that I would love to be able to show up for others that I actually don't have the capacity to do, because my own fuel tank is so low. Basically, it's been so depleted in the way that I was depleted in that relationship, and so there's some refueling of myself that needs to happen before I can authentically be in service to others in ways that I used to be. And then there's also healing and healing of my nervous system, healing of my fears, etc., that needs to happen before I can be as adventurous again and engaging with reality as fearlessly as I used to and as I have at times. So this realistic, authentic self is this much slower person on this road trip where I'm stopping and seeing some things, but also spending some time just sitting and being with my inner conflict, hearing these parts yelling at me that I should be different, that there's something wrong with me, and that I shouldn't be the way I am, and telling me how I should be instead, and making it through those cycles, which is really uncomfortable. I mean, I'd much rather either be curled up at home under covers, or like just following somebody else telling me what to do, like signing up for some project where somebody else determines like what I do every day and how I live my life, or just being that quirky, adventurous, carefree spirit that I'm also currently not. So yeah, I'm somewhere in between. And it feels better to be real. It always does. But it's also a struggle each time moving through one of those cycles and letting go of an identity, or forcing an identity and allowing myself to come back to where I'm really at. It's such a painful process. If I didn't know how incredibly rewarding it is to have inner peace and to be able to sit somewhere and do nothing and have no, like not be dependent on outside things happening to make me happy, but just have that contentment bubbling up from the inside, just from being present with myself, with my parts, and in devotion of reality, that is so worth the struggle, which I totally forget when I'm in the struggle. But having just come back to that place just about an hour ago, I'm just reminded again of like, oh yeah, this is so worth it. So thanks for listening. I'll check in again soon.